Episode 31 of the Barber Shop Podcast from Boxo Studio. I am Tickled Pink, and I'm picked to start with Ryan, so what's that make me? Chartreuse? What's that?
Fuck.
I don't know.
Why you gotta hit me with the fucking sideball like that?
Right out of the back.
I wasn't prepared for that.
In the cave a little bit too much sometimes, so we're coming out with both barrels. We've had a great day. We had, Pretty Archie on earlier, and was looking forward all day to have Steve Foster coming by. He had to cancel out earlier in the year, and that terrible,
which led to the drunk cast.
Yeah. So he's partially responsible for us debating.
We'll do a part 2 of that one day.
One day.
Okay. Next time somebody cancels, we'll
do that. But
it's hammered again.
It's a guy that I've admired and count as a friend as well as a fan, and someone who's got a really unique perspective on not just music in general, but specifically music here in Hamilton, Ontario. He's got a lot of great stories, a lot of great genealogy to explore, and he's going to play some old music and some brand new music and a little bit of live music in between. And Steve, thanks for coming, man.
Thanks for having me.
You know what? Growing up, were you a gifted musical child in a musical family where there was dancing and singing, or were you just someone who kind of got jerked in that direction?
My mom was musical. She played accordion. I mean, they came from Scotland when she was 9, and she wanted to play piano, and they couldn't do that, so she was kind of, she played that. My dad had a guitar around the house, and he couldn't play it at all.
But he knew it was cool because he had to have a guitar.
I guess so, yeah. So, I mean, it was around, but not... It was mostly like hanging out with friends.
And it became something that it was a commonality between people, because music really speaks volumes, and both of us grew up in a real magical period where songwriting and kind of exploration of music, the people we loved were directly linking to musical stylings of the past, and being open about it and exposing us to that too. So who were the bands and what was the music? There was a lot of people a bit older than us. It was the Beatles. When they saw the Beatles, that blew their mind. But for you, is there a time
I had
remember?
that through my mom, but I mean, for me, it was the local stuff. I mean, I grew up with Brian Lewis. We played hockey and baseball, and his older brother was in Teenage Head, and the Shakers were from my neighborhood, and mostly through that. That was a bigger influence on me than mainstream music. Mainstream music didn't really hit me hard till I was probably grade 7 or 8 or something like that. So
did you find at grade 7 and 8 that the fact that you grew up in what was an incredible rich scene, you didn't know it at the time, but did that put you at odds? Because I remember in that time period it was very, very ghettoized. Music identified you, and in my era it was the disco people and the rock people, and the twain did not meet. And here you come from a place where you've got the Shakers and Teenage Head right in there, and that's what you understand as music and good music. Was that still years ahead of what commercial music was at the time?
Yeah, maybe. And I mean, it was pretty limited too amongst all the circle of friends. I mean, most of the other kids were listening to all the mainstream pop stuff. It was just a group of us because we were hanging outside hearing their brothers' bands play in the basement. And Mike Gerlecki lived in my neighborhood. All those guys. So it was always around, and everybody always played Westdale High School.
Yeah.
So even Dalewood, we saw bands. I remember when I went to Dalewood, we had bands in the auditorium that we saw.
Yeah, music was very entrenched, especially in that part of West Hamilton. It was, it was understood, right?
Yeah. Oddly enough, I couldn't get into the instrumental music program in Dalewood, and neither could Mike Merrill.
Yeah. Caveman Mike.
Which actually one day later on that we were working for a painting company, we happened to paint Mr. Ward's classroom, and we were playing Edge Fest the next day, so we left him a nice note on his desk.
From the Failures, yes.
Yeah, it was
Thank
good.
you so much.
It was a kind of a nice, kind of shining moment for a bit there.
Well, I think that's kind of an embodiment of rock and roll. The whole kind of fuck you attitude is very appealing to a boy at that age. It certainly wasn't for me.
Of that.
Yeah, I remember 15 years old. I was just did a benefit in St. Catharines last week, and it was the very place where I was drinking 5-Star and going to see Teenage Head at Dennis Morris High School. When I was 15 years old. So big turning point in my life when I saw that. that and the power of, you know, the guitar and the voice and the show, you know, and it's just, it really is, you know, if you understand what, say, a movie like Star Wars or something has done and what it affects a kid, to actually see that in real life and understand it's real, you know, it's not on there.
Oh yeah, I got a feeling too, we're probably one of the last generations that saw a lot of professional bands at their high school.
Yeah.
You know, because that was disappearing by the time, you know, we were in high school, but it was still happening. But when I talk to some of the guys that I play with in Saucer, some of the bands they saw at their high schools, unbelievable, you know, like, you know, so it was like actually part of the circuit. So I think it was a little bit different vibe that way. So I don't know, the group of bands that I came out of Westdale with, we were all influenced by that. You know, it was because it was right there. Yeah,
and writing original music or playing music like that wasn't understood. It wasn't, you know, option like this is what I want to do. Do you remember your first band? You know?
Yeah, Mike Merrill and I were in that band together. It was called Weekend Pass. We mostly played Ramones, Inmates, and Teenage Head, and we had one original song. So and it probably lasted a year or so.
And how old were you?
15, I guess. Yeah. So, because from that, while I was in that band, I was taking guitar lessons with a guy in Westdale named Mike Martino, and he was playing with a guy around town named John Crawford, who's still playing around town. And he seemed to think I was good enough to sub in for him one night. So I played the Gown and Gavel, I guess, a couple months after my 16th birthday. Yeah. And I met Tom Wilson that day.
Wow.
So that, you know.
Yeah, no,
I get all kind of jazzed up.
Yeah, John's a friend of the show, and he's still, you know, plugging in, you know, great blues guy. And
we played every dump up and down Barton Street.
Yep. You know, fearlessly. And as far as what entertainment went, where people would go out and stick around a little bit longer, you know, it was understood that live music was your option. It was in a lot of little places that you wouldn't consider music clubs. They would still have music on a regular basis. Like Tom Wilson cut his teeth in coffee houses.
Yeah,
right?
We did like the El Dorado and the Britannia and the Prince Eddie and the Balmoral.
Yeah, Balmoral
and the Corktown, of course. Yeah. You know, I remember playing with John, and we opened for Eugene Ripper, and that was kind of cool because that was like I was starting to meet guys that were kind of outside the, you know, the standard 3-45-minute set box, right? Like Tom and Eugene and stuff like that, right? Yeah. So that had a big influence on me. Where I went after John, kind of thing. Yeah, you know. So it was exciting. My parents were furious. It was great.
Yeah, it created the kind of magical tension, you know. I mean, because you've got the you know, tactile example of like that's what I want to do. Yeah, you know, it's like holy fuck when you see that and you're, you know, transformed on a daily basis, and these people are buying into it at this point, right? Yep. They're saying, okay, I want to encourage this and nurture it.
You hate to make it, you know, all about money or anything, but you could actually make a living. I mean, I was making good money in high school.
Yeah.
You know, doing like Thursday, Friday, Saturday night every week. You know, that's better than any part-time job. So it almost seemed like, you know, I almost had a real job.
Yeah.
You know, as well as going to school at the same time. So,
yeah.
And that's incentive, you know, when you're
absolutely
16, 17 and you want to get a case of beer and whatever you're doing.
Your first, what you would consider big gig. The first time you were like walked out and you said, "This is like a serious stage and a serious audience."
You mean like in a nightclub or in a?
Yeah, it could be a club, a soft theater.
Probably the biggest thing I did would probably be Edge Fest. I guess it was in '96, and even though we were on the side stage,
right,
there was 35,000 people in the park,
right.
So and we were on during changeover, so you know people would go back and forth. So that one, I distinctly remember.
Yeah, but in a time where you were, you know, building, you know, your reputation and going through different musical entities, I guess, but you've got the same core of people. A lot of people you play with over the years. It's a community, and it's like, and you played with some greats from this town. Like, who are some of the people that you've played with, and what kind of projects?
Well, I mean, like, obviously the guys in Simply Saucer, you know, all those guys. I got, you know, I was just such a big fan of the Florida Razors and all those guys, and then when I started playing the Gown, I started to get to sit in with those guys. in a lot of ways, that's the most exciting time, because it was like, you watch them for years and years, and then you start hanging out. And then one day, Tim used to love to like get me up on stage and not tell me what song we were doing or what key it was in.
No.
Just like 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like sink or swim, kid. So, which that was all great. It was good times. Like, I and other people, like I got to play with Steve Leckie for a month. It never turned into it. He had this idea for a band. I answered an ad in the Spec. Turned out to be him. He was staying at Conrad from the Kill City Dragons place, and I went up there and rehearsed with him, 4 or 5 times in a month, and then he disappeared.
Right.
So I had a lot of cool, interesting, moments like that.
Right.
Which are good, I got to play, with Laurie Yates for a gig or two, and
wonderful lady.
All kinds of, and like real different walks of life and music amongst all those people too. So
yeah. Okay, so the Crawlin Kingsnakes, that's probably a point where people started hearing your name or reading your name or seeing your name connected with a group that was starting to make some press at that time in Hamilton. Tell me about the kind of evolution, and we're going to spin a couple tracks from some of the earlier stuff.
Sure.
Tell me about those days and what led into that.
I think I met the Crawlin Kingsnakes Mach 1 probably in like 1988. I think I was playing with Matt McGarrett, and we used to open up for them all the time. Paul was living in London. The band was based out of London. Paul was living there. And then Paul moved to Hamilton. The rest of the band was still in London, and then little by little, this person and that person started to leave the band. So Paul decided to just kind of clear the slate, stay here in Hamilton permanent, got a new lineup together, which Greg Plant was the bass player. He still is. And a drummer named John Leasing was the first drummer we had. And who else? Well, after John, we had Gene Champagne for a short time.
Yeah.
And then Mike Stewart, who's still our current drummer. So
okay.
It was just kind of, I knew Paul. Actually, Paul was dating a girl that I went to high school with, too. So I kept running into him all the time. And
did the band have a genesis, or was it just another period in the evolution?
Yeah, it was kind of just I don't know, Paul tried to like do a complete break from the whole, they were a little bit more countrified than we were. So he was trying to kind of update it a bit. And I think because we were coinciding with grunge, heavy guitar was kind of, it was starting to creep back in. You weren't hearing a lot of it on the radio at that point, because I think I joined the band at the end of 89, beginning of 90. So the first record, kind of, we have that kind of heavy blues, bit of country in it still, rock and roll. And then the second record, we kind of roll more, I don't know, it was weird. We kind of got into a Humble Pie vibe or something like that. So,
well, I think I want to play Load and Rolling.
Sure.
And has that got a particular story behind it?
It does. It's before my time in the band. The Kingsnakes used to go to, and I'm thinking it's probably the Cedar Lounge. And there was a band called Loaded and Rollin', and they were, a really bad drunken cover band that had a house gig there. And then I guess one night they were so plastered they couldn't do it, so the Kingsnakes got up, and then they wound up being the house band. So Paul wrote the song based on those.
I love those kind of stories.
Yeah.
All right. You get to hear some beautiful early Kingsnakes with Steve Foster here at barbershoppodcast.com.
Jimmy's or a drink, and later on you catch the band. And when you've had enough, you buzz, and you fall down 'cause you can't stand. Yeah, we live in a rolling, stumbling in the street, trapping over our bootstraps, everywhere we meet. Yeah, those rolling, stumbling everywhere. Whoa. You know it's no The money's burning in your hand. You stop at Scottish for a drink, and later on you kiss the band. And when you've had enough, you buzz, and you fall down 'cause you can't stand. Yeah, we loaded and rolling, loving in the street, trampling over our roots there, everywhere we meet. Yeah, loaded and rolling, loving everywhere. Yeah, loaded and rolling, you know it just don't have any love.
That's rock and roll, right?
Yeah.
So-
It's funny. It's got an aspect of punk rock way back in there somewhere, but
It's also got that era aspect to it where there's kind of the bombasticness of Kiss and and the big arena music that was blowing up at the time too, because that was huge, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, Paul had a pretty varied background, but he'd been in a lot of different types of bands before this too, so I can hear it all. You know.
Like, you remember, was it a relatively enjoyable recording experience?
Yeah, it was
a good time.
And we did it in Kitchener. I mean, we talked about going to Grant, and Paul just wanted to go out of town for some reason, like to make it the focus of everything. And we recorded it was called Central Ontario Recordings, and it was in the basement of some building in downtown Kitchener. And it was a cool studio. The guy built his own Neve knockoff board. He was a pretty clever guy, We recorded a 16-track 2-inch, which is rare. Mm-hmm. And in the parking lot next door, there was a chip wagon and a kid who sold hash.
Yeah, pretty well everything you needed for a rock band.
So and we did it. I think we only it took about 4 days to do the whole thing.
And what was your knowledge? I mean, for those of you who don't know, Steve's very accomplished working the board as a producer and an engineer and a front of house mixer. So he really knows his stuff. But at that point, did you know anything about, or did you know enough to be dangerous?
Yeah, maybe. I'd been in an 8-track studio a couple times, like when Gavin O'Sullivan and I were playing together in high school. We went to Rob Ott's studio, actually, who's now, I think he's like the president of BMG now. One of those big companies. So I'd been in the studio, and my guitar teacher, the guy that hooked me up with John, had a studio in his house where I took lessons. So I'd been around it a bit, but I didn't really assert myself on that. I mean, I just deferred to,
Right.
Paul had been in Paul had actually just been in Synchro Sound in Boston before that too, which was the Cars studio.
Right.
So he'd been in some major ones. So I kind of, I just played guitar. Did what they asked me to do.
Now, as far as guitar goes, is there someone in particular, like that, other than Gord and the people that you were playing with early on, or did you always have your own style, or were you constantly discovering new guitar?
No, I mean, I had I was always trying. So I took lessons at first at Waddington's, and the guy was heavy into jazz and blues and stuff, and he tried to turn me on to that. It kind of didn't take so much. I mean, I liked the blues, but I wasn't really much of a jazzer. And I had all the typical records, grades 6, 7, and 8 when I was really getting into guitar. I mean, I had Led Zeppelin 1. I copped a lot of stuff off that, stuff like that, albums like that. And then, but I don't know. I mean, the bands that I was in at the time, we were doing. The Shakers and Teenage Head were our mentors.
Yes.
So we were kind of following, and we were finding out who Arthur Alexander was and all these other names on the, on the cover tunes that we're putting on the records too, right? So I think locally things were a bigger influence on me all the way along for some reason. Like it just, you know.
So
we have so many great bands. Like, it's just,
it really doesn't end, and a lot of times it isn't until after you listen maybe to something that you recorded years ago, where you pick bits out. Where at the time you were just doing it, and you're like, wow, okay, I really hear someone else in there.
I can tell what I mean. Actually, and Tim Gibbons was there for a lot of those sessions, Tim's, playing harp.
A lot of people,
stuff.
Cite Tim as someone that's just like affected the way he plays.
I mean, I remember seeing the Trouble Boys at some Hungarian banquet hall, in high school, and. I hadn't seen a local player really, that good. I mean, in that way. Mm-hmm. Like Gord's was always different in a much different way. Like he had his very specific. You knew it was him as soon as you heard him play. Same with Tim, but Tim could cop so many styles that you'd get into a show and he'd really start rocking, and the next thing you know, you're like, out come the hammer-ons. You're like, where'd that come from?
Yeah, it is, and it's like Tim is like, if he's into it, it's like the best thing you've ever seen. And there's some where he's not into it, and it's not, But boy, oh boy, he's still like, as far as entertainer goes, and you got to put that around, because that's the fucking business. At the end of the day, you're there to entertain, and that's a brand that you kind of embraced, right? Like right on, you were doing too much, weepy couch cushion stuff, right? It was during an era when you partied hard and you played hard and it was rock and roll.
Yeah, not a lot of ballads in my career.
No, and a song like Harry Carey,
No, I mean, I don't know, all that kind of. It's funny the way he was too, though, because I lived with Tim for a while years later, and I gave him my lap steel, and he stayed in the basement for a week till he mastered it.
Yeah, and when he all of a sudden stopped playing guitar because he wanted to play the banjo, and he just played the banjo for 8-10 years, and he did it wonderfully.
Oh yeah,
kind of fearless, and he kind of still approaches that. And he's a minimalist. He comes down to a place like this, and he loves it. Okay, I mean, you got just enough equipment. Let's go. Anymore, you're going to be dangerous.
Well, that's when I showed up from high school with my pedals. He was like, "You don't need that shit, kid." But I mean, I shouldn't. He's not the. I mean, I was lucky. I mean, by the time I was 19, I was playing with Claude DeRoche and Bruce Buchanan and Rick Miles and Jack Pedler. Yeah. So, I got a really good kind of ground level education about guys, that were working musicians, but a lot of them had been on labels in the past and, had the upside and the downside.
Yeah, you were getting
So it was,
a real education,
I remember
as they say.
Busking in Hess Village with Claude and Bucky till we got enough for beer, and Bucky lived where 33 Hess was, and throw an extension cord out the window and set up on the street.
Good to go. Hydro included.
Yeah, it was good.
So I want to get to, got a lot of good music, and I want to hear some stuff live too. I don't know. Do you want to play Hurricane, or you want to play?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, because I really like the sound of the last track, and I think it's in the same kind of pocket, same kind of anger and youthful.
This is kind of more to the ballady side, but probably about as close as the Kingsnakes ever got to
going commercial.
Yeah.
All right, Hurricane from Crawlin Kingsnakes on Barber Shop Podcast.
a stone.
A little bit of epic rock and roll. And that's, I guess, what they call a great bathroom song in the day. And that got a lot of bands played when there was vinyl, or the day, like disc jockeys played shit over the radio. And they wanted a song where they could actually go and, even have a number 2 if they had to. It's like the long shifts overnight. I'm not allowed to talk. Is that the wrong number, Ryan?
No. Just so everybody knows, nobody went number 2 during that break here.
No, that's true. That's right. We didn't even get off our ashes. We're too busy talking, and some of the good conversations that we have, when the songs are on. There's a lot of neat stuff that we touch on and kind of remember about the era and the time. And the Kingsnakes went through, a few changes, and I want to know what happened between the first album and the second album, and we'll cover a track from the second album. But what was kind of like your understanding and your evolution along with the band at that time?
We got picked up by Cargo Records on the first, which was our first kind of nationwide distribution, which that obviously led to a ton of playing.
Yeah,
and I think there is a difference between the way we're playing on the second record. It's like we're gelling.
Yeah.
Like everybody in that band had a fair amount of experience coming to the table, but playing together and riding around in a van together for that amount of time.
That's when it really happens. To find
it's
out
like,
your brother, you're going to kill him or not.
Yeah.
And it's a relationship and it's business, and it's, it really is. The guys you got to be tight with, right?
Yeah. And I mean, that was at a time too, like, I was a musician pretty much full time at the time, so everything went into the band.
Right.
We paid ourselves enough to barely get by, and everything went back into the project.
Right, and of course with greater ideas and greater ambitions, onward and upward. That's the way to do it. So second album comes out, there's a couple tracks, and they probably cover different times, things you were thinking, evolution as a songwriter as well, right?
I started writing with Paul on the first one, but not a ton, and then the second one we wrote a lot of it together. So, and it would be, like a variety of different ways. Sometimes just in sound check,
right,
coming up with something. Sometimes somebody coming with an idea and working it out,
Right.
So, I mean, we're learning our craft.
Yeah.
So at that point, we'd been in the studio a few times, and we were doing lots of like local cable TV shows and radio and stuff. So we were kind of getting good at being in the studio.
Right.
I don't think we were all that. We did okay on the first record, but there wasn't that comfort level going on yet.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it took a lot of beers to get that comfort level.
Yeah.
And on this, not so much. And on the second record, I mean, we spent about $10,000 on it, but it was all money that we raised selling merch, playing shows, and we were patient. And then when we started shopping around the studios, like Mike Stewart was drumming in the band at the time, so he was, he had a lot of experience as a sound engineer, and I was just getting experience as a sound engineer. So we rented all the gear and set it up in my dad's barn. We were there for a month, and we would just, between our work schedule and whatever, we'd just go up there, in the morning and not leave until my dad was getting phone calls from the neighbors.
So clearly, I think that alone is going to have a different feel, that, the timeline isn't there, because there's a lot of pressure when time is money and you're paying by the hour.
Yeah, we ran down a lot of ideas. We had lots of guests. We had Jerome Godbout came and played on it.
Yeah.
And, like Paul went to pick him up. They broke down on Highway 6 and had to get, thumb it the rest of the way, and then Jerome got there, and I had 2 Marshall stacks in my dad's barnyard doing tracking. It was like, and then we stayed up all night laying down harp and guitar parts and stuff. So it was like, the clock wasn't ticking, so we could just goof off. And I made another record for another band at the same time, and so it was good. It was kind of the first time I got to really spend that much time in the studio,
immersing yourself in the whole procedure.
I mean, I still had to go to work in between, but I was there so often.
Yeah.
So,
and your dad's barn, it doesn't get any better than that. And there was an old 59 Corvette there in the corner with
No, I think there was like a 1958 8N Ford tractor though.
I want to play a track off of the second album.
Right.
Will Donnelly. It's
Paul. I mean, Paul's from the London area, and it's based on the Black Donnellys from Lucan, Ontario. So, I mean, Paul always did try, even when I first met him, to keep a lot of Canadiana in the subject matter. Yeah. And when I joined the band, they had just finished a tour with the Tragically Hip on the Up to Here, which I think hanging out with Gord that much kind of pushed Paul to really, pursue that a little bit further, right? And this is probably, there's allusions to stuff like that on the other recordings, but this is probably the first outright, real Canadian, subject.
A slab of history from Crawlin Kingsnakes on Barber Shop Podcast. We got Will Donnelly for you.
Will Donnelly came from looking up on the Huron track. Now his life is history, but it don't mean it's fact. In St. Patrick's Parish, on the road line, 15 miles from London, born in 1845. Will Donnelly, he was a cunning, sharp as a steel trap, cool and determined, a devil dressed in black. In the town of Lucan, 1875, Donnybrook, Fitzhenry's Hotel ended with guns and knives. And later, Father Conley, from the pulpit of the church, called him the terror of the township, called him the devil's work. Will Donnelly played the fiddle, standing at his door, pistol in his trousers, played the sea hall. He played the bony crossie, tapping out the time, down on Willis Corner, for the cowards of the Roman line. The year was 1880. They laid the Donnellys down, murdered John and Joanne, Bridget, James, and Tom. Coal oil burnt the farmhouse, buckshot finished John, but there still stood Will Donnelly with a curse for the Lucan song.
You got to have the ending. That's the rock and roll ending.
Oh, yeah.
So we were talking, during the song, some of the people that you meet, you like, and the business working and working shows and opening for people. And now your experience working both sides, of the stage, does the business still hold, the fascination that when you were...
Yeah, there's always there's always bands new and old that, you know, will excite you. Like, sometimes I'll mix a band and then I'll go home and play guitar all night.
Yeah.
You know, because they were inspiring. You know?
Yeah. And when you tingle, there's something that you can't control. Like, you know.
Yeah, you get the hair on the back of the neck going on.
Someone's doing it right.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've experienced that lots. You know, I've been lucky. I mean, I've worked with my fair share of not so great bands too, but I think the ratio is in favor of the better bands.
Absolutely.
For sure,
you know, and the product you've been putting out has been consistently good. Like, and I want to talk about, you know, one area and one time in your life with Stoked. I want to talk about that band Stoked, which was, you know, caught a lot of buzz. That's when I, you know, was like, met someone who was very near and dear to me for a couple of years because she was working with you at the time.
That's right, yeah.
And, and it was like a neat thing to be able to, you know, kind of go into that scene of that band. It's kind of at that point. And it was the timeline kind of in line with what you were thinking with that band, or did things happen a little more furious than you thought?
Well, I mean, things got out of hand, but I mean, as they do. But no, like the Kingsnake thing, like I left the band because after the second record we were doing okay, but things just were starting to fall off. You know, we had a few major disappointments where we got strung along by, you know, ex-manager or whatever. So, and I was kind of listening to a lot of shit that was coming back. Like we were competing with grunge, because I left in '95, so we were kind of competing with that. It was really picking up steam by that point. And a lot of those bands reminded me of what I was doing before the Kingsnakes too, you know. So I kind of started writing in that vein again. And I was guitar teching for the Killjoys, so I was watching bands every night. Yeah,
you were seeing what was working,
and writing on the bus, and you know, and we went on tour, Edge Fest with Green Day and Foo Fighters, and you know, all these kind of bands, and watched them every day, you know, and hung out and drank beers and played ping pong and, you know, kind of thing. And I just got back into that style was in my head, and that was what, you know, and the Kingsnakes for the time being had kind of run its course. So, and Mike and I Mike was playing with my brother at the time.
Mike Merrill, by the way, like a fantastic drummer. You know, I mean, I don't think there's a person who's seen him drum who hasn't been blown away.
Self-taught, man. I mean, like when we started playing in high school, he was just sitting there with a record player and a pair of headphones. Yeah. You know, and one day he came up to me in the cafeteria. We'd played hockey together and stuff. He's like, "Hey, man, you want to be in a band?" You know, I'm like, "Yeah, sure." You know, so and it was good, you know, because I mean, we were instantly popular. Yeah.
So, just at the end of the day, that worked.
Well,
you know?
And any musician who tells you otherwise is
full of shit. Because it wasn't always just the love of music, you know. It was the love of possible mating potential.
The attention was okay too, you know. Like so. Yeah. So I mean, so Mike was playing with my brother, and I'm trying to think of what compilation disc came up, and I had a song I wanted to do, so I'd planned on taking Greg with me from the Kingsnakes anyways, and then so I started jamming with those guys, you know, and that was kind of Stoked Mach 1, and we went into my friend Mike Northcott's studio, did 3 tracks in a night, and on a whim I sent one into CFNY, and we got on the disc, and then we played Dundas Square and Edge Fest and all that, and then the way we would party, you know, things got out of hand. Right. Things blew apart. Greg ran off with some girl, moved to St. Catharines, and, you know, was at the point where he was hitchhiking to rehearsals and not making it, and so Mike and I fired him.
Yeah, it's for the self-preservation of the band.
So then we went and got Bob Melanson, who was he was actually the singer in the first band we were ever in. He was playing bass with somebody else. Did a couple of rehearsals, got a showcase at the Reverb that Krista and Amanda set up for us. And Bob went nuts and showed up wasted, told us both off, and left. So I was sitting there with this great showcase with no band going, what the fuck am I gonna do? And my brother was playing in the Rayburns at the time, so I needed a bass player, but I was like, man, it'd be great to, you know, add another guitar player if my brother was willing. I was like, you know, so I got those guys, And probably we made a lot more inroads with that lineup.
Yeah.
In the beginning, because Mike and I toned it down a bit, and we're behaving ourselves.
Yeah, kept it at a good high RPM, but
we were
sustainable
still
for
partying pretty good, and and we were at the point in Toronto where, we were fun to party with. So Amanda worked at Universal, so her friends were coming out, and I was working for Tom, so I was getting in and out of Sony all the time, and they were coming out, and things were really,
Yeah.
But I think in the end we scared them.
Yeah. You were right up.
That's really what happened, because, it just hit a point where we were just so over the top.
Yeah.
And we were still putting on good shows.
Yeah.
Miraculously. I don't know how.
It was fierce. It was like fission in the center of a nuclear, bomb. But
because I could never go on stage in that shape now.
No. It could have been the time or whatever. But
I don't know.
Let's put a testament down to great genes, maybe.
I
right?
guess, man. Yeah, good Scottish genes.
So let's talk about "Empty Pockets," the track we're going to play. What gave birth to that?
I don't know. It was. I remember writing it kind of. I kind of had the riff, pretty much all built. I was in a real Replacements kind of mode at the time. I didn't really know who the Replacements were until one of my high school bands, somebody compared me to Paul Westerberg once, and so then I went, and I was always kind of fading in and out of that. I was more into more traditional punk and garage stuff, but that I started getting kind of into that. And I think to myself anyway that I can hear that I was listening to that when I wrote it. But I only had 2 or 3 lines lyrically, and I had the idea for it. So we kind of just did the rest on the spot.
Fleshed it right out.
Yeah, Mike lived in a house in Hess Village, which big mistake.
Yeah. You'll hear certain themes repeating themselves over and over. Location.
We lived there. We had a house gig at Polo's. Yeah. Thursday, I don't know, what would we do? Thursday and Friday we'd called it one thing, and then Thursday we called it one name, and then Friday we were the Swindle Twins, where we'd just have all our friends come and sit in and stuff, and so we were doing that all the time on top of gigs and living in the village. And so it's a pretty Hess Villagey kind of song.
And it's got to, obviously, if it came together that quick, it's got a real visceral feel to it.
Its subject matter is probably pretty close to that kind of vibe that was going on. A little
close to home right here at barbershoppodcast.com. Empty Pockets, Stoked.
Not enough to do. Be the same as me.
Pure right up the middle. Rock and roll again, Steve. I love it.
Stoked songs were always short and to the point.
Short and to the point. Yeah, it's kind of like, the headbutt or something like that. I like that. The Scottish pineapple.
I think we were in a hurry to get to the end so we could get another beer.
Yeah. So it's a band that was, it seared like a hot ember and burnt out, but
we had good things go on though and stuff. It was a lot of fun. Tom helped. It was really helping us a lot at the end, and that kicked open a lot of doors. So we played some good shows. And we had a riot. Yeah. It didn't end as like we would have wanted it to, but.
And the story continues to write itself, right? No chapter's ever closed, right? Because you're doing the Kingsnakes stuff now. You probably didn't think at the time that you would be revisiting.
Yeah, and I didn't think I'd be playing with Greg again, and so and I don't know. I mean, it's funny. Although right now it's funny because it's like when people talk to me about Stoked, it's like either the Brian Mello band or So I don't know how much of a mark we really left.
We made at the end of the day.
At the end of the day, but because I'm like, no, not that band, the other Stoked. I kind of hoped we were notorious enough, but.
No, I think there's a certain underclass you are. The people who are in the no.
Yeah.
So,
sure.
The tune you were going to play, I wanted you to play something live, and you mentioned this is something you wrote when you were in Stoked.
I started writing it back then. I wrote it. I wrote it on when I was away working for somebody else, and it was way more poppy because I had intended it for Stoked. And then I started writing with Tom. He kept inviting me over, once a week or something, go hang out. And so we took this chord progression and it started morphing into something else, and then had pretty much the song finished. And then I guess Tom and Colin Cripps were getting together. So the next time I went back, it had a bridge and some more lyrics. Yeah. And so it's weird because the whole thing took... I started on it, I left it alone, and went back to it, had different lyrics altogether. I started up again, wrote some new lyrics, and it was a long time in coming, and it morphed a couple of times. But in the end, it's a strong song, but it's definitely not a Stoked song anymore. Yeah, it's kind of, but it's I recorded it with the Kingsnakes for our record that we hope to get out. Hopefully it'll be on iTunes at least in the next couple of months. Yeah, something you'll be looking for, downloadable product. And you can on crawlinkingsnakes.com you'll be able to find more information. Yeah, the link there, and you'll be able to link off barbershoppodcast.com to the website anyway. And there's video and there's other things up there of other things we've done. Some tasty bits. Yeah. It's nice with the social media when you start going through the files and the archives, and you're going, okay, now I get to pull this stuff out for good reason, and you're like, oh my God, I remember that. Yeah, man. And it was yesterday, wasn't it, son? Just yesterday. There's like a Darren Laidman interview on that I'm like, holy, people in the background that I haven't seen in 20 years. Publications that don't exist anymore. Yes, yeah. Guys that worked at Hammer Magazine and all that kind of, that are long gone, right? Yeah. So, yeah, no, that's okay though. It's all part. It's cool. I mean, and most of my major errors, like you keep seeing on the internet, were done before the internet. Yeah. Yes. Thank God. So if I play it cool from now on, I'll be all right. Good. All right, this is called It's Hard. Went mental on drugs, then I got pneumonia, lost on an endless night, I guess I couldn't phone ya. I sat in a car and heard a song about love and power. Why do I sleep alone? Hard to give when you're so cold on the shoulder. Every day puts me deeper, makes me older. Jumped on my roof just to hear the summer. traffic and trees. I fell into slumber. Hard to lose a city, getting hard to lose an hour. Why do I dream alone? It's hard to give when you're so cold on the shoulder. Every day puts me deeper, makes me older. Under your spell at an all-night picture show, the one that won't let it go. Now give me love, give me soul like Johnny Cash, give me thrills like Dylan's $1 billion bash. Flicker out of sight. Why do I live alone? It's hard to give when you're so cold on the shoulder. Every day puts me deeper, makes me older. It's hard to give when you're so cold on the shoulder. Every day puts me deeper, makes me older. I keep forgetting about the camera. I think I'm in the recording studio.
No, you are. I like to ring out, you know. I mean, listen to the mix. Oh, beautiful song, you know, and being doing the singer-songwriter thing, you know, I guess it's in the heart of every good song is that, you know, that stripped down, you know, orchestration.
If it works that way, it's going to work anyway, you know. I mean, I love to go out and scare the shit out of myself playing solo acoustics. You know?
Yeah.
It's the only time I ever get really, like, a bit amped up anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's like I can't just look over my shoulder and give the drummer the stink eye when I fuck
Yeah.
up. It's, like,
It's so true. It's the blame pedal, right?
However, the rider goes much further.
Yeah. Yeah. It's still have to work with yourself, though.
Yeah. No, that's the hardest part.
It is, you know, sometimes because it's, you know, we've touched on it many times. It's rock and roll's a vicious game, you know, and it's tough to justify it, you know, past the point of passion.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, why do I do this? Why do I put myself through this?
mean, I'm sure everybody that's ever picked up a guitar or any instruments asks themselves that. You know, it's not many jobs that you practice for all week to maybe get paid for on the weekend.
Yeah.
So, you know, you have to love it, you know, and it chooses you.
Yeah. Yeah.
For sure, you know.
Yeah, it's pretty consuming.
But I don't think I would have wanted to do anything else. And I mean, I've been lucky, you know, on a playing side and a tech side to, like, you know, go places and hang out with people who, you know, are a little bit different than the ordinary neighbor.
Yeah, and those connections, I mean, I'm sure at the end of the day that's what sustains me in this business is the people are so interesting and often just incredibly genuine. You know, they can't afford not to be. You know, it's kind of
you meet more people like that than not.
Yeah,
I would say, you know, like, and it is good. I got friends all over the country and other countries, and you know, I'd probably, if I'd, you know, gone to the mill.
Yeah, you know, you have your friends there, but it's like nothing like, you know, and they say when you've been on the stage, you know, nothing, you're ruined for everything else.
Even the bad, crazy shit now is, you know, it's amusing now,
yeah,
right?
It's
like,
cute.
you know, like, I mean, I had so many, you know, the Kingsnakes, had car accidents and, you know, a multitude of
there's a checklist of the things to do if you're a rock star in a rock band, and it's like
bailed the bass player out of jail before the gig, all kinds of, you know, in the Kingsnakes we had a lot of that kind of stuff for a while. We had this kind of, we used to, you know, tell everybody our van was like the Gruesomes. We had the black cloud following us everywhere, right? So
bad luck.
But we had as much good luck as bad luck anyway, so and now it's just they're fun stories to tell,
Yeah, and then you survived them, and that's the main thing.
Yeah, and many of us didn't, I mean, we were talking about that earlier, like I'm older now than Matt McGarrett ever got to be, and in my mind's eye he's still older than me.
Yeah.
And that's when you start thinking about shit like that, and a lot of guys, didn't get past 30 or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it was 27 was the age, and then Elvis was 42. Those are the two big ones.
And now we're at an age where a lot of our heroes are of an age that they're, at least now they're succumbing to natural causes and not excess, but,
But time marches on and things change, right?
Yeah.
We're in a constant adaptation of.
I think being a musician, though, it makes it more interesting. You wouldn't think so when you're 18.
Yeah.
But the longer you do it, it just gets more and more interesting all the time. So.
Yeah.
I mean, I've played. I never in a million years would have thought I would have been a member of Simply Saucer.
Yeah. So how did that connection come? Like Simply Saucer had been around since the 70s.
Yeah.
And so you had an awareness of who they were. They had
Bruce Mowat drove me crazy
because he loved them so.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
much.
when he was working at Mole Records, I don't know if he was still working there when that album came out, but he was already talking about him back then. I don't know where that came from at that point, but I remember when he backed them for that first record, get the full court press, So that's probably really when I had listened to it in earnest, right? But I didn't know any of the guys from the original lineup at all. And Joe and I had played together for years. He was playing in the newer version because they didn't know where Neil was, I don't think. And then they did a couple reunion shows with Sparky, the original guitar player, and he lives in Montreal. He's got a career, and he wasn't, he thought that reunion thing was fine, but wasn't willing to
commit.
Yeah, so they got Mike Daly, and they were rehearsing at my house for the first bunch of shows. I wasn't even home, actually. I was at work. They were just using my studio. So I'd call home and, so what do they like? Ask my wife, what do they sound like, And I guess they did one gig with Mike at the Casbah, and then, he's a busy guy too, right? Yeah. And he's living in Toronto, so he bowed out, and so they asked me, because they were at my house anyway, so... And it turned out it was a good fit. Like the first gig I did with them, they were like, "Oh, you're in." So, and I didn't. It was easy to find my role. I mean, it's a 3-guitar band. And you think, "Oh shit," you know. But we really got a good thing going.
Takes the pressure off and all those little creative.
Well,
bits
yeah, I learned where not to play, especially with those guys, or to back Ed in the parts, because sometimes now he'll just let the guitar go and just sing, and then so I'll morph out of my part into his or something to but
some real heavy hitter musicians, people who have a real vibe, and Ed's been on the show, and I just adore whatever he plays, it transfixes.
Yeah, he's such an interesting cat. Like he's just he's done a lot of cool stuff too, and he's got that whole other side to him, with his acoustic guitar, which is nothing like Saucer.
Yeah.
It's like but it's been an interesting, because when I joined the band, mostly the audience would be filled with old guys. And then this past weekend at the Silver Dollar, it's like it was wall-to-wall kids, which is interesting. But we still kind of have a little bit of that. We're chained to Cyborgs a little bit still. I mean, part of that is we've added new material to the last 2 albums we've done, but there's also been songs from the past reworked and stuff like that, so maybe not making a clean break, maybe kind of perpetuating that a bit, but I mean, it's a fun band to play in, and it's one of the biggest compliments of my life was at Hamilton Music Awards, and Colin Linden came out and said, that we had one of the best guitar weaves he'd heard in a long time, which coming from a guy like that is a compliment of the highest order. So that, it's interesting for me to be a side guy again, because I haven't done it in a long time, and it's it's kind of relaxing.
Yeah, I would imagine so in a lot of ways, and it's like I'm a big fan of the genre, so I certainly like what you've added to it. So I want to touch on some of your original stuff, but I want to touch on some of the new stuff, and this is something that's going to be on the I'm going to call it an album.
Of mine?
EP? No, we're going to talk about the
Kingsnake.
The Kingsnakes.
It'll be a full-length album.
It'll be a full-length album. So the period, your original music, again, is something that you put, I write a song, but I don't see it in this vehicle. I don't see it in this vehicle, and it kind of hangs there where that's got to be a Steve Foster song.
Yep.
Is this what we're talking about when the things that you kind of consider your solo project?
Yeah. I usually have a feel for what's going to work, and what's not going to work with the other guys,
Right.
But and sometimes I just think, oh, this is a really good song. I want to keep it to myself.
Yeah, and I often wonder that, right? Because I would be really torn if I felt a real affinity to a song. But I don't know if anyone else really gets this or can do it.
Yeah, I've got a song like that's going to be on my record that I have on occasion played with the Kingsnakes too, and I always feel kind of odd about it. Like it might be appropriated somehow. Or something.
It's like it's the cotillion, and you don't want to take her out.
Yeah, and I'd like to get. I've been talking about this record for so long that I'd like to actually complete it, and I got to stop giving songs away to other projects.
Okay, well, we'll officially PO this one, Crash Crush. I like the sound of it.
I did that at Catherine North. It was my first time. My brother has figured out the Factor formula. Excellent. And got me a Factor grant, so I went in with my brother engineered it, and he played guitar on it. Duke Foster, I should say.
Duke Foster.
He was a hell of an engineer in his own right. And Gene Champagne on drums, and Mike Northcott on bass. I don't know if you know Mike.
No.
Early 80s, he played in he was in London Underground for a little while, which was a fairly big Hamilton band at the time. And the Squad. He played in a band with Wayne Cruz for a while too, I think. So, Mike and I worked together at Nelvana early 2000s, making cartoons. He's the music producer.
Right, okay.
So, he's played with me off and on for years,
Yeah, he had the Jingle Factory.
He worked for Mike McCurley. He actually plays in Mike's band still. So Mike was the bass player, and we just went in, and I spent a day, cut a couple of songs. Actually, I made a stab at the one I just played, and it didn't work out.
But Crash Crush had a soft spot it landed in.
Yeah, I wrote it just after Stoked.
Right.
So it was recorded quite a while ago, and I've just been sitting on it. So I'm like, and to me it still sounds valid, so I'm going to put it out.
Okay, and it's being released out to you at barbershoppodcast.com. We got Crash Crush from Steve Foster.
Steals 1,000 words to tell you how I feel. In the back, the letters hash. It never seemed so real. I feel this rain, this empty gaze, staring at you now. It's not the same, the place, the blame. Well, all the season, not so well. Now crash, crush. Now crash, crush again. Now crash, crush. Now crash, crush again. Jesus killed 1,000 men, strong and steady as they stand. Feeling rip, another kiss, it's waiting round the bend. I feel my hands, how strong are they? Too subtle in the end. It's not too late for a reason now. This time my line is relayed. Pass it by on my knees, swerving through my heart's debris. Not crash, crash, not crash, crash again. Not crash, crash, not crash, crash again. Not crash, crash again. Not crash, crash again. Not crash, crash.
That's it.
Crash Crush, something from Steve Foster. Beautiful. And I was saying, you know, as soon as I heard it, wow, Duke has got a huge sound there.
Yeah, man.
He's a hell of a producer. And he's a great musician too. You know, all around nice gentleman, I have to say. Mr. Duke Foster. So the Crawlin Kingsnakes, I'm starting to read more and more about it. It's popping up on social media, and it's like, what the fuck? I thought this was dead and buried. And lo and behold, it's come back together. And I want you to talk about kind of what brought you guys together and what's happened from the point where you said, yeah, let's do this, to what you're doing now with them.
My getting a job at Hamilton Place had a lot to do with it, because Mike, the drummer, is the engineer in the Great Hall, and we were hanging out. Hadn't been hanging out for a long time, 10 years probably, and just hanging out. I was still playing lots and stuff, and he was talking about he missed it, and we talked about doing one show, which we did at the Casbah. We got together for beers with the other guys, and you know, we hadn't talked in 12 years, any of us. So, I mean, well, Greg maybe a little bit less than that because of the Stoked, but we hadn't been speaking, not out of design, just hadn't been. We're just living. And then we got together for a rehearsal, and the first rehearsal was like we never left. It was unbelievable. I was like, couldn't believe I even remembered those songs. Yeah, you know. So rehearsed it up, did a show, had a pretty nice night out of it. You know, like a lot of old friends and stuff, and then talked about maybe doing something else. We had one more rehearsal, and I laid a song on them, and then from there we just started rolling. And we wrote them all as we went, which we've never done. Yeah. Because, you know, before we would write them, we would probably live with them for a month or two before they ever got recorded. So they were pretty worked out live anyway. But this one, you know.
Nobody got time for that now, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know about time, because, I mean, really, we started this in 2008.
Right, it's been drawn out.
And it's been, you know, I mean, it's not like we've been getting together every day or anything like that, but me joining Saucer in the middle put it off a bit too, because we had some real busy periods there and stuff. But just, I don't know, it was so easy after 12 years to walk back in like that. It just seemed like the right thing to do. And as soon as we started recording, we were having such a good time that we just kept on going. Yeah. So, and then I think we're all itching to get out and play those songs to people now. We've been, you know, we've actually lived with them long enough that we're already writing another record. So, you know, time to let them. Yeah, I mean, let them run in the field. You know, Howard and Hod, like, well, do we do CDs? Nobody's buying them anymore. Do we do this? Do we do that? So this month we're like, you know, we're finally ready to master it. So we're like, let's just put it out on iTunes. You know, let's get it out. If somebody wants a hard copy, we'll look into making some. Yeah, we maybe hand deliver it on our wagon. Well, we did do a little limited run of the Casbah show, which was all pretty much hand cut covers and all that kind of stuff. You know, kind of like how we started. Yeah, you got a little romanticism to it. Even Loaded and Rollin', it was manufactured by a large manufacturing company. We made all the covers ahead of time. Paul was a graphic artist, so we made all the covers, and they ran everything and then sent it to us, and we had to insert everything and send it back and have it packaged. So, which actually saved us a pile of money. And Paul was always big on do it yourself. Yeah. Like, I think it's really important. Yeah, there was always an emphasis on that, and we made our second record completely by ourselves. So, and the idea was always to show, you know, industry types that, you know, we had the ability to do it ourselves. So if we had some help, you know, we could even, take it further kind of thing, right? So,
right on.
And we had our close calls, but it never really worked out that way. Cargo went under. We never saw the rest of our stock.
Right.
So,
there goes.
I know there's a guy in New York State who's selling them on his website for more than we ever sold them for.
Hey,
so
what? Somebody's pumping lifeblood.
Yeah,
it's like you're making a nickel off it. Good for you.
Yeah, I mean, whatever.
We'll hunt you down. No, we'll get Rufus on that. Rufus Crawford. Right on there. Okay, so I Can't Pretend.
It was one of mine that I was kind of toying around when I was writing stuff for my record. I wrote it. Well, I wrote the lyrics on this. I was working for Ian Thomas, and I was standing at the side of the stage, and he said something, and by the end of his song, the lyrics were done.
Nice.
Kind of thing. So I drove home with lyrics, and then I just spent the rest of the night banging around. And I kind of had an idea, of taking it a certain way, and then we were recording one night, and Paul asked me if I had anything else, and I just kind of did it spontaneously and wound up doing it differently, but much better than the old version. Yeah. So we just ran it down that night, taught it to them that night, just ran it enough times till we got the gist, and then laid down the bed.
There you go. We're going to hear it right now at barbershoppodcast.com. Some Crawlin Kingsnakes, brand new. And it sounds like it just was given birth to and a golden child. It's nice when something comes together like that.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah,
you can definitely feel the energy.
Yeah.
When you record, are you a big proponent of early recordings, trying to get those captured and keep them down?
I do everything live off the floor.
Yeah.
All the beds. I mean, even the 2 records with the Orphans, and made them sing through floor monitors.
Yeah.
Because it made them more comfortable. It's like it's rehearsal.
Yeah. Any other tricks that you would care to share? Because I mean, you've been on both sides of the process.
I don't think I use anything much different than other guys. I mean, for me, the tape is always rolling.
Right.
And I used to do that to those guys all the time because, usually we'd go back and the one that they weren't thinking about was, like most bands. It's the same for, when I'm on the other side and I'm not the engineer, I don't want the guy to tell me when I'm rolling, really. I just want him just to let it roll and we'll just play, because the more that goes on, the more I start thinking about shit. And,
yeah.
I'd rather just be in the moment,
lay
it down. So, but yeah, I always subscribe to I don't put a lot of junk on stuff. I go as direct, David Briggs, direct as possible to the medium, and then if I got to add something later, that's fine. But and I keep it pretty simple.
Yeah.
I learned a lot of different stuff when I was working with Dan Aiken. He's used all the Glyn Johns techniques and and all that stuff, which was cool. In certain applications, but where most of the places I'm working in now, it's live off the floor seems to work the best.
Yeah, and any technique is interesting insight, right?
Yeah,
it's like it never ends.
Oh yeah, I've had absolute accidents sound great too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not supposed to work. We talk about that, the cost of something. You can't get caught up in that. You have to trust your ears.
Yeah,
because that's the end of the day. What counts.
Yeah,
and Ryan even mentioning a microphone, and when you'd be sure it'd be crappy, and then on someone's voice it sounds incredible.
Yeah.
So you can't really ever chuck a mic, right?
Oh yeah, I've got all kinds of pieces of junk
sticking around.
Still got one of those little AKG, the hammer, from I don't know what it's from, but it sounds great on guitars.
Yeah. So you're going to keep that.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, I want to play one more tune. This is another one that's going to be on the new Crawlin Kingsnakes CD.
Yeah. Well, it'll probably be like a free
bonus
download off the website or something.
Yeah.
Because I'll have to pay Elvis Costello.
Yeah, we don't want to have to pay Elvis Costello
Lowe.
and Nick Lowe because
they got lots of money.
That's right. But it's an homage to a couple of great songwriters.
Yeah, it's 2 of our favorite songwriters and one of our favorite songs, and it's one of our favorite covers to play. We don't do a lot. We never have done a lot of covers.
Yeah.
Even in the beginning.
That's why it's a treat. It's a rare thing, to kind of have this. And the words are very apropos, today more than ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
A great song. What's so funny about peace, love, and understanding on Barber Shop Podcast.
Darkness of insanity, I ask myself, is all hope lost? Is there only hatred and misery? And each time I feel like this inside, there's one thing I wanna know. What's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? Oh,
What's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? Not a hell of a lot, eh, Steve? You know?
No.
Well, thanks for coming by the shop and bringing your message of music and some stories and some insights, a real slice of Hamilton rock and roll history.
Well, thanks for having me, man. This was like a lot of fun to do.
A lot of fun to do.
I highly recommend it.
Yeah, you should come out and get in line at the Barber Shop. It's worth the wait.
Yeah.
Ryan, once again, thanks for doing what you do so magically.
Hey, no problem.
Hey, no problem.
This was a good, it was a nice little marathon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it. Rock and roll.
2 in 1 day, a new record.
Yep.
Yeah, another milestone.
Who knows what's next, right? And
4.
if you're out there and you're loving it and you want to be our intern, get a hold of barbershoppodcast@gmail.com. Get a hold of us and say, yeah, I want to do that. I want to learn about the magic of this thing. And it is magical, isn't it? It's magical, Steve.
It is.
It's magical. Thank you.
We can't pay you, but it'll be fun.
That's part of the magic.
Yeah.
That's how everybody starts, isn't it?
Thanks for coming out.
Thank you, man.